welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me for another jazz guitar lesson. Today we are going to look at the tritone substitution. We're going to look at what it is and how it is commonly used in jazz. So the first thing we need to do is define the term tritone. So the tritone is a specific interval, and when we talk about intervals, we're talking about the distance between notes. And with the tritone, we are talking about a distance of 3 whole steps. So if I were to start on G, and I moved up 3 whole steps, I'd go 1 whole step to A, 2 whole steps to B, 3 whole steps to D flat. And I'm going to place this D flat, instead of on the 6th string, I'm going to put it on the 5th string. And so our original note is G. We're moving up the distance of a tritone to D flat. And if I were to go up another tritone, I'd get back to G, because the tritone inverted is another tritone. So G to D flat to G, G to D flat to G, G to D flat. One of the interesting things about the tritone is that it is the halfway point in the octave. So it evenly divides the octave. So G is the octave, and that's the midpoint, right? It's 3 whole steps. If we did 6 whole steps, we'd end up at the octave. So if we went from G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're back at G. So in addition to labeling the interval a tritone, we can also call this an augmented 4th or a diminished 5th. So here's a perfect 4th, and I went up a half step, so I've increased that distance, I've augmented it, so we call it augmented 4th. Here's a perfect 5th, G to D, and if I decrease the distance by a half step, I diminish it, I get a diminished 5th, right? So, tritone, augmented 4th, diminished 5th. One of the other things that should be apparent when I play that interval, the quality of the interval is quite tense, right? There's a lot of dissonance there. And because of this, for centuries, the church would call this the devil's interval. They actually believed that evil spirits traveled through the dissonance that this interval created, and there was actually a time where composers would be executed if they used this interval in their composition. So, not the case anymore. This is actually a foundational principle of Western music and can be quite beautiful, as you'll see. Okay, so we've defined the term tritone. Now we're going to look at how we use this interval in the context of a harmonic substitution. So I mentioned a moment ago that the tritone substitution is one of the more common harmonic substitutions in jazz. And the place that we see it most frequently is in the 2-5-1 on the 5 chord. So we're going to be replacing the 5 chord with a tritone substitution. Now this isn't the only place we can have a tritone substitution, but it's a very common application of the tritone substitution and a good place to start as you build your understanding of this concept. So let's look at the key of C major. We're going to have D minor 7 as our 2, G7 as our 5, and C major 7 as our 1. And I'm going to use shell voicings because they're very easy to see. So D minor 7, D is my root, F is my flat 3rd, C is my flat 7, G7, G is my root, F is my flat 7, B is my 3rd, C major 7, C is my root, E is my 3rd, and B is my major 7. So we start with D minor 7, and instead of going to G7, I'm going to replace this with the tritone substitution. And so what that means is I'm going to look at my original root, which is G, and I'm going to move that root up a tritone to the D flat. The other two pitches are going to stay the same. So the G is going to move to D flat, but I'm going to have to pick up my middle finger and put it on D flat, and then the index finger is going to come back and replace the F. So we have D flat, F, and B. And in relation to the D minor, you'll see it's actually very nice voice leading, because here we have D, F, C. The two outer voices, the D and the C, are just moving down a half step, and the F is staying in place. So D minor 7 moves to D flat 7, and then we resolve to the 1 chord, the C major 7. So we have really nice voice leading. So one of the reasons why this works is that we retain the two essential voices from the original 5 chord, right? Because the two most important notes of a chord are the 3rd and the 7th. Here we have F, which is the 7th, and we have B, which is the 3rd. G is my root, that's what we're replacing with D flat. Well, on the D flat 7, I still have F and B. The relationship to the root changes though, right? The F now is the 3rd of the D flat 7, and the B is the 7th. So those two voices are also a tritone. F to B is a tritone. So really, we have two tritones to be aware of within the context of a tritone substitution. Resolving to C. Now, because we're retaining those two voices, the function of this tritone sub is the same. It's a dominant function. It's taking you to the resolution to the tonic. So we can resolve G7 to C major 7, or we can resolve D flat 7 to C major 7. They both function to take you to a resolution of C. Now, the other thing to be aware of with the tritone substitution is that it creates descending chromatic bass motion. So we have D minor 7, the bass is moving down a half step, here's my D flat 7, and then down one more half step to C major 7. So the other thing I can do is I can pair the original 5 chord and the tritone substitution in succession. So I'll start with D minor 7, and if it's 4 beats per measure, I'll have 4 beats on D minor 7, and then for the 5 chord, I'm going to split the measure in half. I'm going to go to G7 for 2 beats, and then move to the tritone sub for 2 beats, and then resolve. So if we use both, usually we go to the 5 chord first and then to the tritone substitution, because the tritone substitution is increasing the level of tension. And we usually want to increase the level of tension right before resolution. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it the other way. I could go D minor 7, D flat 7, G7 to C major 7. But it's not as effective and less common. Okay, so we've done the tritone substitution with shell voicings. Let's build the harmony out a little bit. We're going to add the 9th. So D minor 9. I'm going to add the E on top on the 2nd string. And then for the D flat 7, I add the 9 there. That's the E flat. And then for the C major 7, I add the 9 to that and make it a C major 9. So we have D minor 9, a D flat 9 to C major 9. These voicings work really nice with the bossa nova rhythm. And what I'm doing is I'm just alternating the bass down to the 6th string. Okay, so let's look at some variations. I could do D minor 9, move to G13, splitting this measure in half, and then moving to D flat 9, to C major 9. So again, that sounds like this. All right, so let's build out a little more motion. How about D minor 9, G13, D flat 13, C6 9. So again, that's D minor 9, G13, D flat 13, and then D flat 9 to C6 9. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. There's a PDF for my Patreon subscribers. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date on all the new content I upload. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.